in yesterday's session, I told the little story of the nearest neighbor approach and how the PSAR was a multiple iterations of tweaking and just wrestling that snake so that it would approximate my trader quality number on my best days when I was really happy with the way I had found the balance between letting it run and preserving profits. And then the freedom that I felt when I was able to sort of just release the responsibility of doing the thinking just to the dot maker. There was something satisfying about the way the dots would just keep marching their way north and pegging along like little steps in a road march. What I was reminded of today was the tweaking around the frog box over the years. What started off as a effort to try to understand the difference between signal and noise and just coming up with a standard definition of it. And then the realization slowly dawning on me of what that frog box could be used for. And more of as something to rely, a building block or a base to rely on, as opposed to anything, absolute or theoretical, fundamental with a great big explanation. In the field when you're trying to get a vehicle unstuck, sometimes all you need is a board to stick under the wheel so you can get just enough traction to get going. It could be gravel, could be straw, could be a piece of canvas. Quite often just a 2x4, just so you can get the thing moving. And then over time, the frog box became more and more useful as it, crafted rules around the slow frog, the quick frog, and the leap frog, each of which was a tweak, trying to deal with what we observed about price action, that a lot of times that if you waited for that hour to elapse, then you missed the easiest move of the day. Twice a week that would happen, 2 times out of 5, that the opening was either in the top or bottom 10% of the daily move, meaning that there was, wherever it started, it left the station and then just kept going the rest of the day. So if you waited the whole hour on the day when it was easiest to see the move, you missed it because you were, being strict on your hourly move. So well, maybe we just go to a half an hour. And then there was some where it would just take off and just go. Quite often after a large gap, that you would get a large gap, and then from there it would either go up or down like a rocket or a falling piano. And so the idea of the quick frog came about, where you could take a frog box and then immediately, if it violated that, it would immediately trigger. But then if it went, but it didn't go a full frog box and started to reverse, I started having to keep track of the working high and low of the day and then tracking a frog box away from that. It was a logical way to sort of get a triangle where it's compressing, and then you get a breakout. But practically it was too hard to trade because there were too many adjustments if you were trying to trade more than one symbol. And then finally, the idea of the hybrid frog box, which was simply to say, when I linked it up with the insight that, the start of the day is simultaneously the high and low. So just maybe straddle that with one frog. Instead of putting a box on either side, just bisect the box with that so you get to a half a frog box, and then learn to tweak that even further and further. Well, after about 6 or 7 years of fighting my way through that whole, step-by-step process, to finally just realize, what I'm really trying to express, after all, is just the minimum manageable risk box anyway. The idea that the more like a critical state, or the more like a doji this thing is, when that doji is located on a critical price, that you have everything that you want. Like you just say, please just go. I don't care what direction you're we're going to go. Just make it simple and just go, and I'll just tag along, you know, like a hog chasing the turnip truck. Well, that is sort of the evolution of the minimum manageable risk box. That as I started to reduce the size of the execution risk, so that the price where you got in, the smaller that was away from the price that would invalidate the hypothesis, finally it hit me that, oh yeah, that's actually what we want, because you can either use that as a fractional 1R loss, a much smaller than 1R loss. So keep your standard position size, but now you're maybe only taking a 0.1 or a 0.2 loss anyway. And then if it fails, you're in the trade that you wanted anyway. And then realizing the seductive lure that, oh, if I make it a 0.2, well, then I could actually have 5 times the size of the position and still only take a 1R loss. And I quickly realized that that was sort of the fear and greed taking over, fear of missing out, and then the greed of wanting to get, a very, very large position size. What I eventually reconciled with was the idea of just let it be a 0.2 loss, and then if it works in your favor, you got an extra 0.8 out of what you would normally get if it was a frog, and just be content with that, and then don't lose your mind trying to squeeze every mathematical advantage out of what is essentially an approximation anyway. That you could quickly lose your peace, or at least I could. I quickly lose my peace of mind if I start trying to finagle different position sizes on my standard symbol every time the thing comes around. It was just too hard. And I was willing to trade off the simplicity of just put a standard poker chip on it. If I lose, it's only a 0.2, and then just move on. That turned out to be very freeing and relaxing. It actually helped me get over my perfectionist self, the greedy self, and just say, look, you're looking to achieve a disinterested mind state anyway. So if it's only a 0.2 loss and you stop and reverse into a better trade, you can't be less interested in the trade than that, where you're actually hoping for a 0.2 loss so that you could just get into the better trade. And then if it works, you just say, oh, well, I guess, okay. I didn't get the trade I wanted, but I got the trade that paid, which is still okay. So I spend most of my time, I would say my developmental time and systems thinking time, probably 80% of the time working on tweaks, and at most 20% of the time working on scratching my head and new systems ideas. And I would say that number's probably going down over the last maybe 5 years, because I feel like I've been working on the inside game of tweaking and adjusting more than I have been trying to come up with grand ideas and new ways of thinking about it. I mean, I still get some occasionally, but my effort really the last 5 years has been more on trying to refine technique. And that's probably, me remembering now and again that I'm 65 and wanting to, get more to closure on some stable systems now that I think we know something about implementation. For which I got to thank COVID in that sense, because it certainly freed up an awful lot of time with nothing else to do but just kind of work on this stuff on a nightly basis and really just dig in and keep shoveling. So, so for me, the tweaking story was really just, for me, where the good ideas come from is when I am actively trying to tweak, and then in the process of tweaking, I look to the side and then notice something else, like, oh, that. So there's something about the attention to detail that occupies my monkey mind and sort of lets the eagle soar a little bit, or the owl soar a little bit, while the rest of my mind is crunching away on some trivia. So for me, the tweaking, is almost the price I got to pay in order to get into the more reflective state. That I have to stay busy with that part of my mind and keep it occupied, or I can never quiet it enough to get it going. I almost have to create white noise, if I could say it that way, with the tweaking in order to free myself to think about other things. I mean, I noticed that in soccer, when we're going through our standard warm-up rituals, is when I actually am thinking of new drills because my body already knows what to do. Yeah, I'm going to dribble the ball for the next 15 minutes over these 10 steps and 1,000 touches, but I can already be thinking about what I'm going to do after the drill session. So there's a freeingness in the tweaking. So for me, tweaking is my favorite thing to do because it's internally satisfying. I feel like I'm doing something, but also I know that occasionally it helps me come up with other good ideas. So that's my story for this week, the frog box and the MMRB and the hybrid frog.